will hear.
You shall hear the prophecy!
Time to shine! Hear the echoes of the valley!
As one with wind and cloud.
The wind knows me.
Silence! The tongues will be destroyed!
Cursed!
I fight hard!
Let my name echo in song!
Bow your head. This world is but
The Hydro Archon is back. A character that I had previously determined to be the strongest in the game, and not just because of her insane utility, but mainly because she fits in so many teams so easily. A character whose inclusion elevates almost any DPS, whether it's your favorite or my favorite. A character that enables fantastic playstyles whilst providing buffs, healing, and of course Hydro application, all in one very simple to use kit. And now with her rerun arriving in the second half of version 5.4, a big question is always going to be, say it with me, should you get yes? Hello everyone, welcome back. So if you don't already have Furina, I highly recommend Furina for a few reasons that I've talked about in the past. Marashosei on pretty much any of your on-field DPS characters like Aloy, massive team damage percent buffs, and of course Hydro application that isn't tied to your normal attacks. It's skill based as well, so you don't even need a lot of ER, at least for that. These alone make her a really easy pull recommendation in my opinion. Even now, she is probably still one of my most used characters just ever. But in this video, I do want to take a little bit of a different approach. I want to highlight some teams where I actually don't use Furina. So that way, if you're still unsure about pulling her, rest assured, you're not going to really be completely locked out of everything. She is amazing, but at no point should you ever consider her to be absolutely mandatory. First, don't forget to subscribe, okay? Did you know that subscribing makes YouTubers feel better about themselves? So just do it. And of course, this channel tends to talk about Genshin and sometimes Warframe as well. So if you're into these games, then feel free to hit that bell icon so that you'll be notified of the latest, greatest videos on the channel. All right, without further ado, let's get into how we usually do these kinds of videos by first talking about what's new with regards to Lady Furina.
Right now, emerge. Everyone come in! The Temple of Wisdom! Decided by destiny! Delved into destiny, a sight to behold. Right now. Right here. Yoo-hoo! Right now. Fate is upon me. Shadows of fate.
Furina's last rerun was in version 4.7, and since then we have had a bunch of new characters show up in the game, including of course the entirety of the Natlan cast as we currently understand them. Now, usually I go through all the characters that would be benefited by Furina, but because Furina is so versatile, we can just basically go ahead and assume that every new character that shows up in the game is by definition a Furina buff. That's it. If there is a new character that shows up, there is a good to fair chance you could put Furina in quite a handful of their teams and have a really good time. But I do want to highlight a couple of examples that have always taken my interest. So, Shigvin has been a character that was part of Furina's last rerun, and look, I like the idea that she has team-wide healing. I just don't like the idea that her skill buff ammo is shared. So if you want to play a team like, let's say, I don't know, Miko, Nahida, Furina with Shigvin, well then unfortunately she's only buffing 3, and with one character being 4 of their off-field skill hits, which I feel is a bit cringe. But I guess if you're playing one of the many teams where Furina is the only skill-based DPS character in the team, well then, yeah, okay, Shigvin can at least hyper buff her, which can be pretty good. But yeah, either way, I personally don't have Shigvin, and I kind of don't want her, but she's cute, so don't hold me to this. There is a tiny but not zero chance I might one day get Siegfried. Okay, meanwhile, I have seen some people try and make Morlani Furina a thing, and I know that was allegedly a meta Morlani team. I'm not convinced that it's even a team. Mainly because first off, you need 3000 ER Shangling. And even then, you're not ulting every other rotation. I just find that to be way too cringe. Or you're gonna have to fight something like the Fluid Avatar of Lava, which has a permanent Pyro Aura. Only then do I ever find that this team is actually a legitimate team where Morlani can do tons and tons of damage. Meanwhile, Shillidan showed up. And I get the feeling I'm going to be doing a pretty big spiel on Shillidan for the foreseeable future, so let's get into it. Shillidan heals. And Shillidan heals a lot. She is in fact one of 2 single target healers who, in my estimation, can actually sustain Furina teams with maximum fanfare, the other of course being C4 Dory. Now, that being said though, because Shillidan's healing is single target, we do have some rotation considerations to consider. First off, if you're running Scroll, which 95% of us are probably running Scroll on Shillidan, then you're going to want to use Shillidan's skill first before you do Shillidan's ult. And if you're going to do that, then you're going to need to wait with Shillidan for a brief moment in order for Shillidan to receive her own healing. Now, the big question then becomes, do you use Furina's burst and skill before you go into Shillidan, or do you start off with Shillidan's stuff into Furina? If you go Furina into Shillidan, then you're probably going to want to swap back to Furina at some point to at least give Furina a little bit of healing. Hold on. Otherwise, you could potentially go Shillidan into Furina. In my experience, that tends to result in less fanfare. I've only ever seen that max out to about 240 fanfare. So, yeah, I mean, it works, but I'm not a huge fan of that, mainly from the fanfare perspective. That being said, though, there is a third option, which is not even bothering to heal Furina and just have Furina heal almost exclusively from overflow healing, which isn't a huge amount of healing, at least for Furina. That being said, though, if you heal 3 characters from about half health, you still get, by definition, 150 fanfare because that's how the math works. And then on top of that, there is, of course, any fanfare generated from HP drain. So I have actually seen, like, almost, if not actually, the full 300 stacks of fanfare, but mainly towards the tail end of Furina's burst. So yeah, it's not the most ideal situation ever, but it's an option. All of this to say, Shillidan can in fact fully sustain Furina teams and even get like super duper high levels of fanfare, but she's not going to be as effective of a healer compared to any team healer like Baiju, Mika, for example, because at the end of the day, those characters can actually front load that fanfare generation, which means that fanfare is of course going to be affecting more of the team's damage during that rotation. And then finally there of course is Mawika, the Pyro Archon. And look, there are in fact some teams where you can use Mawika and Furina together, and they are in fact very good teams. But then on top of that, there are some teams where you don't use Furina with Mawika, especially if you have someone like Silali, because those are completely different teams where you probably really don't want to bring Hydra characters at all. So there are in fact teams where you don't need Furina with Mawika. And even if Hoyo releases a character who doesn't work well with Furina somehow at all, at the end of the day, that just basically means you can use Furina on, let's say, the other side of Spiral Abyss, or another team in a combat event. Look, there's a vast sea of characters in the game, and the vast majority of them can use Furina really, really effectively. So I think that is just pretty much why I will always highly recommend Furina.
Yoo-hoo! You asked for it! Nova, get them! Hey, stop right there! Now you shall perish!
So like I mentioned, I want to talk about some teams where Furina probably is not necessary, or actually is not a good idea at all. But before we do that, for the newer people to the channel, I just want to highlight some of my favorite Furina teams. So here we go. Various Clorinde teams that definitely need a healer. For example, Quickbloom, Overvape with Mawika, hell, even Autodon Taser, that's actually pretty nice as well. Meltloy, specifically the Mika Kaz variant, Quickbloom Technari, Thundering Dory's Raid Squad, the Neuvillette team, and of course, Vape Mawika. By the way, I do actually prefer Furina-based Vape Mawika over Yelan-based Vape Mawika, so there's that. But there's some teams where I actually don't really want to use Furina for a variety of reasons, including, of course, the health drain. So the meta, quote-unquote, Quickbloom Clorinde team, which typically doesn't have a healer, then ends up running into second rotation memes. I did an entire video discussing this, so feel free to check that out. But either way, in a team like this, I'm more likely to run Yelan instead. So there we go. Meanwhile, double Pyro Arlecchino with Mawika, well, we end up with a problem where Furina's Hydro app is actually a lot more on the slower side when you compare her to, let's say, Xingqiu or Yelan. So Furina's Hydro app just simply can't keep up with a team like this. Yelan's can, and that's why I would actually run Yelan on a team like this. If I was to play Dahaya instead of Mawika, well then I don't have to run a Natlan character in order to get the stacks for Mawika, and so at that point, well then we can actually bring back Furina. I have had some success with double Pyro, double Hydro with like Medic Mona, so there we go. Otherwise, the Alhaitham team with like Nahida. Now, if you don't want to lose all of Nahida's damage by running Medic Nahida, then Furina kind of doesn't end up being an option, because Shinobu just simply can't heal the team or even Alhaitham enough to actually get your Furina stack, so that kind of sucks. I personally would rather keep Nahida's damage, because I think Nahida does quite a fair bit of damage, especially in a Quickbloom team. And so once again, this is a Yelan angle. And then finally, there's Nilou teams. Here's the thing. You absolutely can use Furina in a Nilou team. I just don't. Because there's quite a lot of Furina's kit that makes her really good, that is obviously just simply unusable in a Nilou team. Because they don't care about your damage percent. They don't really care about most of anything, and they'd rather not have their health drained because they're already taking damage from the Bloom Seed explosion. So you can use Furina in a Nilou team, but you won't see me recommending it myself. And of course, with Mawika and Citlali being newer characters, we now have even more teams that actively prefer not using Furina, because they also actively prefer not using Hydro at all. For example, Meltloy. Mawika has been a huge boon for Meltloy, to the point where Meltloy is probably encroaching the space of Frenchloy as my favorite Aloy team. So yeah, it's kind of 50-50 right now between the two, but I like them both quite a lot. Otherwise, forward vape Neuvillette, obviously being a forward vape team, you definitely don't want Furina because she's going up stealing vapes. Some say the Shilin and Citlali Mawika variant works. I tried it in the current Lantern Rite combat event. I have not had any particularly good success with it. I'm not convinced it's really a thing, but I'll try it again when I get Citlali proper. And of course, we have Melt Mawika and Melt Arlecchino. And this is mainly because Citlali is really damn strong. That being said though, these teams are a little bit more difficult to play. And of course, once again, I don't have Citlali. But because of that, because Melt Mawika is a little bit harder to play, yeah, once again, I still prefer Vape Mawika over Melt Mawika at the very least. But either way, at the end of the day, Furina is amazing, and you could use her in a whole heap of teams, but still, there are plenty of teams now that kind of don't need her or actively don't want her.
Let the world collide! Fate is upon you. Shadows of fate, it's noted. This one's got your neck. Submit. Give up. Hey there! Hey there!
So when it comes to building Furina, has anything changed? No. When it comes to your artifact set, you're pretty much sticking with Golden Troop. Now, that being said though, if you're desperate for the 20% attack buff from Tenacity, sure. but your Furina's DPS is going to drop off a cliff. Perhaps you're super duper desperate for the 12% damage percent buff coming from Scroll. Okay. You'll also probably want to play with a Natlan character at least so that Night Soul Burst happens. That way you can actually get the energy from the 2-piece bonus set. But at the same time, once again, Furina's DPS drops off a cliff. So yeah, sticking to Golden Troop is usually the way to go. Crabaletta pinches enemies in the balls and does massive damage. There we go. That's a particularly good reason why. Meanwhile, when it comes to the weapons, nothing's changed either. Your 5-star options is basically your signature, Jade Cutter, and Key. In fact, high Constellation Furinas, I think, are finding Key a lot more potent than even her signature, which is kind of hilarious. Meanwhile, 4-star weapons include Festering, the Pipe, and of course Dockhands if you happen to have Dockhands, so there we go. That being said though, there have been some people who try to play Favge Furina. And I feel like, here's the thing. I am not a fan of playing Favge Furina at all, because her DPS drops off a cliff. That being said though, if you're going to play Favge Furina, you might as well lean into it. I feel like Favge Furinas would probably actually go for Tenacity then, or Scroll, I guess. But at least then, if you try to get as much ER as you can, you should be able to use Furina's ult regularly, in which case I guess you're playing like super utility Furina, which might not be too bad. Might be a fine experience at the very least. I'm not a fan of it, but I think it could be something that you could look into if for whatever reason you just don't care about Mademoiselle Crabaletta's damage, for example. And finally we have Furina's Constellations. Now let me just start off by saying, at no point should you ever feel compelled to get Furina's Constellations. If you want them, sure, but you don't need them at any point in time. That being said though, over time I have become a little bit more appreciative of Furina's Constellations, and I can actually see some occasions where they can in fact come in super duper bloody handy, so let's get into it. C1 can actually help any healerless Clorinde team by giving Clorinde a bit more of the incoming healing bonus, which is actually pretty good because that definitely helps with Clorinde's sustainability. Remember, Clorinde is one of those characters where incoming healing bonus actually is super duper good, so there is that. Meanwhile, we have C2 Furina, who actually can make fanfare generation so ludicrously easy you can suddenly play some of the most crazy, outlandish Furina teams. So, what do I mean by that? Well, even with a smidge of healing, you can actually get probably all of Furina's fanfare stacks if you were to play a team like a healerless Clorinde team, including the quote-unquote meta one that doesn't have a healer. It might actually work perfectly fine with Furina at C2 now. So there's that. The Alhaitham team, like I mentioned, Shinobu doesn't really heal a whole lot, but maybe even that amount of healing is enough to maximize your fanfare stacks. Non-C6 Chevy Rational, because Chevy, before she gets C6, is actually a single target healer. Any team that wants to use C6 Diona, remember C6 Diona is 200 EM, so I don't know, some kind of vape melt team could be interesting. And then, of course, any healerless Risley, Linny, Lynette team, for example. Yeah, all of a sudden, they might actually get all of Furina's fanfare stacks. You could probably also play Furina into Shillinen rotations at that point, and you actually get maximum fanfare so much easier, and I guess that rotation ends up being a lot more intuitive as well. C3 is ult levels, which is actually always useful. C5 is, of course, skill levels, which is probably useless if you're a Favge, tenacity player, but for everyone else, skill levels is good, because it means more damage coming from Salon Solitaire. And then of course we have C4, which is actually the energy constellation, which kind of destroys the entire purpose of running Favge, or the Pipe, or Festering, now that I think about it. So, I guess people run Dockhands if they are stuck with a 4-star option for C4 bloody Furina. Let me know in the comments if you have an alternative suggestion. And finally, there's C6 Furina. Okay, let me start off by saying, last time I talked about C6 Furina, a lot of C6 Furina mains just came out of the woodwork and started yelling at me saying, "Oh my god, Kate, you're so unappreciative of C6. No, it's not just playing Furina with Candace and that's it. There's so much more to it." And they're right. Yes, look, I was wrong, and I apologize. and this time I do want to actually try and describe C6 a little bit better based on my now current understanding of C6 Furina, because there are in fact quite a few interesting setups that I had not thought about when it comes to potentially playing C6 Furina. Now once again, let me reiterate, at no point do you need C6 Furina. At no point do you ever need Furina's Constellations. But that being said though, if you do end up getting C6 Furina, there's a bunch of things you can do. So let's get into it. C6 Furina turns Furina into a team healer. Specifically, the kind of team healer that she would actually need in all of her teams, basically. So in that regard, how does it work? If you do a normal or charge or plunge attack, you heal the team for around 8% or 12%, I'm not 100% sure, of Furina's HP. And that's actually quite a lot of HP because Furina at that point probably has an absolute buttload of HP. Of course, keep in mind this is only within 10 seconds of her skill, and you do need to have Salad Solitaire running around in order for the healing to be part of her kit. Now, Furina's HP being absolutely massive means, like I mentioned, the healing is huge. But for those who are wondering, if you decide to have Singer of Many Seas healing Furina, then what ends up happening is that your normal attacks, your charge attacks, your plunges end up doing a ton of extra damage while sapping the team's HP. So that's the other way that it works. So generally speaking, when it comes to C6 Furina, I think I would prefer just keeping Salad Solitaire just running around. But because Furina ends up being a team healer, as a start, it means you don't need any other healer on the team. What does this mean? It means that for something like the Al Haytham team, you can actually run Miko instead of Shinobu, or you could be a filthy fucking heretic. It's entirely up to you. Ditto for Thinglani, or if you want to play Frenchloy, you can actually play the Shenhe Kaz variant of Frenchloy now, which actually would be a massive damage buff for Aloy. A Malwika, Sitlali, Sara Sucrose, Furina team would also be absolutely fantastic. That way you get a lot of buffs for someone like Malwika, potentially even doing some vape melts. And then on top of that, you can actually play the meta Clorinde team without everyone hard stuck at 50% HP. So that alone is also pretty bloody huge. Yeah, C6 Furina is very good. There it is. But it's C6 Furina. She's very expensive at that point. You're going to have to go and pay off that mortgage on your house first to then start up another mortgage so that you can be able to afford C6 Furina.
Temple of Wisdom. Let my name echo in song. Shout, Wakula. Hi, let's sweeten the deal. Shazam! Grow. We've got ourselves tough. Here's the goods! Let's leave her a little. Let the world collide! Warren, gloves off! Sharing my knowledge! Let's sweeten the deal! Shazam! Showering you with praise! Let my name echo in song! Committed to memory! Shazam! Yeah!
So at the end of the day, should you get Furina? My default answer is yes, but I feel like there's actually a bunch of teams where you probably can still get away with Furina. So if you absolutely feel like some of those teams appeal to you, then yeah, you can totally skip her. Keep in mind that she tends to rerun once a year, thereabouts, so you can at least look forward to her next rerun. Hopefully you can save enough Primo Gems to get her, and whatever other character ends up tickling your fancy, good luck with that. That being said though, by the time she reruns, we should be fully aware of, hopefully, assumingly, Jensen's kit. And perhaps you could take Jensen's kit, if you care to look at leaks, into account with regards to making your choice about whether or not you want to get Lady Furina. So that's pretty much it. Let me know what all of this in the comments below. Are you getting Furina? I probably won't, but the more I think about that C2, the more I'm feeling tempted, not gonna lie. But look, my experience with C0 Furina is still absolutely fantastic, so yeah, I probably won't, or maybe I will, I don't know. But anyway, aside from that, look, Furina is still a really straightforward, really solid character. She does need a healer. That's kind of her only weakness. That's about it. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. If you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe for more Genshin Impact content, and until next time, I will see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Strike a pose! Let the world collide! Let the mountain's veins boil! Bring it!
Fallen leaves, adorn my night!
The wind knows me.
Wrath from the sky!
Yielding as ice!